Good morning, everybody. This is John Haller from Fellowship Bible Chapel with an Israel update with my good friend Jonathan Feldstein from Genesis 123 Foundation. Jonathan, welcome.
It's good to see you, John. It was nice to get to see you a couple of times here in Israel recently.
Yeah, and I want to thank you publicly. So I led a tour to Israel, and we had this every day was fantastic. I tried to focus more on visiting places in Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem that I think a lot of tours don't miss. So one day we went down to Hebron. It was during Sukkot, and they were expecting 45,000 Orthodox Jews that day, and it was just a complete madhouse of people. And then we went from there, we went up to Gush Etzion, to the community center there, and we saw this fantastic video about the history of the community there. And then you came over there, since you lived around there. You came over and talked to us for a little while. And while we were talking, we got the news that there was an agreement that had been reached to release the hostages.
I forgot that happened then, but you're right.
Yeah, so you're frozen up. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm not sure. We'll just go ahead, and I'm not sure what's going on here, but we'll do this. But anyway, so Jonathan, again, I want to thank you for joining us. So let's just talk a little bit about the situation in the Middle East and what's going on geopolitically, and your perspective as someone who lives in Israel beyond the security barrier, I guess you would say. So Trump is, Bibi is, Prime Minister Netanyahu is supposed to come to the United States next week.
Right.
So we're recording this on December 23rd. And what's your take on what's going on, trial balloons being floated, the reactions to that, and all of that sort of thing?
Yeah. So my initial take is I didn't understand what's the purpose, because this, I think, will be Netanyahu's 5th trip to the White House this year, which is a little bit outrageous. But then I started realizing, wait a minute, a bunch of the last times, I know the time after the Iran war, that it was sort of to spike the football in the end zone because of the success, the apparent success of the Iran war, and then to kind of rubber stamp President Trump's attempt to, what he says, bring peace to the region. We have to remember that there is no peace, and at best we're in the midst of a ceasefire, but war is still there. And I speak as the father of a son who's currently stationed as we speak in Syria. But I'm realizing that now in the last couple of days, we've been hearing a lot from the Israeli side about Iran rebuilding its ballistic missile capacity, which some have said is a threat no less significant than the nuclear threat. And as a result of that, clearly there's going to be some conversation about Iran. I can't help wonder if this is going to be like another one of the incidents that we saw 6 months earlier, when Trump was giving feelers of division between Israel and the United States, and he was trying to negotiate, and the war that broke out with Iran was on the 12th of June, if I remember, or 13th technically, after midnight, and Trump was supposed to be sending negotiators on the 15th, and all of that seemed to have been a bluff. So I'm just kind of wondering, really curious myself, on an academic basis, if something like that is being cooked up. And as just an average Israeli citizen, with 6 kids and 5 grandchildren and a couple of married children-in-law, wondering if we're going to end up being in a situation where there's an active war again with Iran, and we are subject to bombardment from the remaining ballistic missiles that they have. It's all very curious to me on an academic basis.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you were referencing, I think I shared with you a Washington Post article that sort of did a deep dive into the Iran, the meeting that Trump and Bibi, or what was going on between Trump and Netanyahu back in May and June, where it appeared that there was a developing separation between the interest of the United States and the interest of Israel. And it appears now, according to the Washington Post, that a lot of that was based on selective leaks that were done by people in the government to make it look like there was a separation between Israel and the United States on the Iranian issue, so that it was essentially sort of a psychological psyop that was done by Trump and Netanyahu to make the Iranians more comfortable.
Yeah.
And the result, and so it's very interesting. I mean, I think I suspected, like, I personally did not see that. I thought that maybe people were trying to undermine the Israel-U.S. relationship when these leaks were made, but now it looks like they were actually planning on doing this. So, so what do you? So, and by the way, my feed from X and otherwise, I don't know how they curate the information that I get. My feed is full of Iranian military capabilities and developing Turkish military capabilities. And I want to talk to you about when we get to Syria in a little bit.
Okay.
But how serious are people in Israel taking the Iranian threat right now? I mean, there's all these videos of missiles, there's missile drills, and is that a missile drill, or are they actually going to do something? What's the thinking there?
I've read only a little bit in terms of analysis. I can tell you what I'm thinking, and that I'm thinking, if we use the English phrase, where there's smoke, there's fire, I will adapt that and say, where there's talk, there's fire, or at least smoke. And certainly there's talk, public talk, for a reason. Whatever that reason is, whether there is an imminent threat and Israelis, we need to get our arms around that and restock our bomb shelters and clean them up after several months since we've had to be in the shelters on a regular basis. Or if there's indeed a warning to Iran, or if there's something else that I am not putting my finger on. But I think that certainly the talk is not random. It's been consistent enough. It wasn't, to my assessment, it has not been an isolated comment of one or two people, or the same person in one or multiple outlets who might have an agenda of some sort. I think what we're actually seeing is some kind of clue. And if Israel is saying that when Netanyahu is coming to Washington, that they're going to be talking about the ballistic missile threat from Syria, I don't doubt that something's going on. I'm not a huge conspiracy theorist, but I also will give a little bit of a tangent. It's about within the last month or so that we've seen Iranian sources say that the Houthis in Yemen have gone rogue and are no longer under Iranian control. And I have to wonder if that's not some sort of way to make us feel appeased that the Houthis really aren't under their control and the Iranian puppet master can't pull the strings of these backward tribe of terrorists in Yemen, and maybe we need to have our watch on that. I don't know what's happening. I just know that something's happening.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Iran. We'll kind of bring up the Houthis. There's really a lot of moving pieces because Israel, as we've discussed in the past, is fighting I think we used to talk about a 7-front war.
Yeah.
Then we added an 8th front, which was information and propaganda war.
Yeah.
And now I think there's another one, and this will relate to when we talk about Syria, is the Turkish front. where there are some significant developments there. So, um, do people in Israel view there as a significant Iranian missile threat that's imminent, or is it a situation where you just don't know?
I think we're being given signals that indeed there is a ballistic missile threat. How imminent or serious it is, I can't say that I know, and I don't look. I read what's public, and I don't think that most Israelis have access to anything more. So, how serious a threat? Very hard to assess. But clearly, this is not being parroted just for someone to feel like he's important, sharing theories about threats from Iran.
Well, go back to it seems like years ago, but it was only about 6 months ago
Yeah,
that there was this 12-day war between,
yeah.
we went from the 6 Day War in 67 to the 12-day war in 2025. And how, I mean, I don't think I got to talk to you during that time, but living where you live in Judea, how how do you deal with the threat and what's going on in your mind and everything when you're under these Iranian missile attack, which was, I don't know how many hundreds of missiles were launched into Israel. I mean, what happens and what goes through your mind at that time?
It's very stressful. Fortunately, Israel innovated. We have this very sophisticated air raid siren system that gives it warning by region where rockets or ballistic missiles may be coming from, whether it's from Gaza or Lebanon or the Houthis or from Iran, and that includes drones as well. Fortunately, we have that, but what was adapted during the Iran war, the 12-day war, is a system where we were given a few more minutes of advance notice saying that we're on the verge of having an attack has been detected. It may affect these areas. And that gave me, first of all, it gave my daughter, mother of 4 little boys, the ability to get her kids in their safe room, in their bomb shelter, a little bit quicker than hearing the air raid siren and having to have at most 90 seconds to get everyone in and take cover. So that alleviated a lot of the stress. But it also gave me the opportunity. Anyone wants to go to the Genesis 123 Foundation YouTube channel and scroll back to the last half of June, you'll see me outside every single time I'm at home. And there was a warning of a siren where I'm narrating what's going on. And I'm speaking about the stress. I'm speaking about the annoyance of it all. I'm speaking about how I don't really want to take all this seriously. And I don't want to be running downstairs to my bomb shelter every single time, because then they win. But then I also know how big these missiles are. They're massive. They're 12 yards long. You and I could clone ourselves, hold ourselves like this, and still there would be room to slide us in the tube, the cylinder of these missiles, and have space that would be not comfortable, but not squeezing us in with Crisco either. There was one very eerie situation that I only realized afterward. At about 7 minutes, it was the only time, John, that I was holding the phone, looking at my face. Most of the time, I would do the panorama. This time, I decided I would look in the phone, and I was speaking into the camera so people could see me. Only afterward, and after I went to the bomb shelter, did I realize that you could see the missiles passing behind my head. It was crazy. It's fascinating. It's crazy. So it's eerie and it's scary and it's annoying and it's frustrating to think that maybe we're going to be back in that situation again, where I want to emphasize we're not at peace, but there's been relative quiet, and we haven't been sent nationally, millions of us at one time, to the bomb shelters in some months. I don't recall how long, but it's a few months. And it's funny to be thinking, even to be articulating that, first of all, that we have bomb shelters, and second of all, that we can't remember the last time because it's been months. Things are very normal in a sense here. And we just celebrated Hanukkah. There are a lot of tourists around, and that's a blessing. And I guess the last thing to say that I'm concerned, I'm fearful for Israel on the whole and for the projects that we have at Genesis 123 to bring tourists in March for Run for Zion, to bring tourists in the fall again to harvest olives with Root and Branch, that another 5-day, 6-day, 10, 12-day war with Iran is going to shut down tourism again for most of 2026.
Yeah, and by the way, I do have a tour that I'm sort of working on scheduling for the time around Sukkot again this coming year in 2026.
Well, then you're going to have to come pick olives.
What's that? Yeah, I need to build that in or do an extension to give people time to do that as well. So I'm just in the process of getting the pricing and everything together on that.
Yeah.
So, well, tell us what you do at Genesis 123 Foundation with regard to picking olives, or what
Sure.
I think you call it Run to Zion.
Well, our mission at Genesis 123 Foundation broadly is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. So if you go to genesis123.co, you'll see information about Run for Zion, which is the first Christian program around the Jerusalem Marathon. You'll see promotion of our stunning book that came out celebrating Israel's 75th anniversary, Israel the Miracle. You'll see links to my podcast, which you've been on a number of times, called Inspiration from Zion, which is now almost 4.5 years as a podcast and 5.5 years as a webinar series. You'll also see links, and you've met my friend and my partner in Root and Branch, Marzia Amirizadeh. She's remarkable, a dear friend, somebody who always inspires me. She was born in Iran just before the revolution, became a Christian in Iran in 1999, and 10 years later was arrested and sentenced to death because she became a Christian and spent 9 months in Evin prison. She visited here for the first time. I hosted her on my podcast in early 23. A couple of months later, she came to visit for the first time. We became fast friends. God gives her remarkable visions and gave her the vision to bring Christians to harvest olives in Israel, which on the surface sounds very random, but now almost 2 years in, when we've brought 2 groups of Christian volunteers, we're actually out harvesting olives from public olive trees, which when we started the harvest in 2024, I realized that these are in fact the wild olive trees that Paul is speaking about in Romans 11, from which we get the name of the program, Root and Branch. The website is rootandbranchisrael.com. And so we're bringing, I actually have a bottle of it here. We're bringing Christians to harvest olives. John, it's one of the most remarkable things I've done in my 40 years of nonprofit work. You can see the bottle you can see our logo, and you can see the bottle of anointing oil. I wish you could smell it on screen. Marzi came up with an unbelievable fragrance, combining biblical fragrances, including nard, which I didn't know much about, but what Mary used to wash Jesus' feet in John, I think it's the book of John. And right. The smell is magnificent. We're just going to begin next in early 26, starting to sell this. But what's so cool, the money from these projects comes back to various things that we're doing here together in Israel. But what's so cool, I spoke on my last trip in the US. I was at a home church in Dallas, and I held up a bottle like this, and I just had this epiphany. I said, this is the only anointing oil that has a pedigree. I know where the oil that's in this jar, where the olives were picked, and what ancient sites and what modern cities. And it's a blend of that. It's really remarkable. So we're doing this great thing, an American-born Orthodox Israeli Jewish settler, along with an Iranian-born Christian, now American citizen, combining our vision, combining our love to bring Israel and Christians together, and specifically Marzi's vision about reuniting positive relations between Persians and Jews, and God willing, Iran and Israel specifically. And if people aren't coming, people will come on your trip. and then they should stay because they can come and pick olives here, and it's the best.
Yeah, I will say, every time I go to Israel, it's sort of it re-energizes my faith, especially visiting biblical sites. So, like I said, the day that I saw you down in Gush Etzion, we had been down to Hebron to the Tomb of the Patriarchs at Machpelah, and then because the traffic was it was insane down there. First of all, they acted like they weren't going to let us in because we were Christians, but we were able to talk, or we kind of went up the command chain at the IDF and they allowed us in. And we had a rabbi friend, and I apologize, I do not remember our name, that sort of spoke up for us. And not only did we get in, we got in sort of during the early special prayer time. Nice. Before the big crowds got in. And then we left there. We did something interesting. We walked down the street there. I want to say that it has the name David in it, I think. And we walked down to the Hadassah House.
Yeah.
Or where they have a museum about the 1929 Hebron massacre.
Yeah.
And then we heard the story about Hebron was rebuilt with these strong Jewish women wanting to come back and reestablish the community. And then we went to Gush Etzion and we saw essentially the same story being told there about the founding of the Gush Etzion community in the 1948 war. And it was the same story we heard everywhere. And we also saw the beginnings of it. We went to the day before, we had gone to the Gaza envelope and spent the day there at Far Aza, at the Nova site, and Sederot, meeting with the widow of the first police officer killed on October 7th at his grave in the Sederot Cemetery.
Wow.
A very powerful. So I think it was kind of a unique tour in that sense. But it was sort of the same story everywhere we went about how the Jewish people had come back to the land and had all of this opposition from 1929 to 1948 to 67 and now 2023 with October 7th. So, and we were there I think the day or two after the anniversary of the October 7th.
Yeah,
attack.
sure. You were here. That's right. Yeah.
So it was just incredible. And I don't know if you ever saw it. I don't want to take up all the time here, but after we went to the Gaza envelope that evening, we went back to the hotel in Jerusalem and we walked over to the city of David for a light show.
Oh, yeah. I remember you went there.
Called Hallelujah. And it was about Nehemiah. And it was a light show, laser show, projected on the wall of Nehemiah at the city of David.
Yeah.
And the convergence of the biblical, historical, and prophetic and geopolitical that we were seeing right in front of us was just very emotional for a lot of us. So anyway, so let's go back. And also you do help IDF soldiers too with some equipment needs and that type of thing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
We were doing that before the war and since the war. Matter of fact, Christmas Day 2 years ago was the day we launched our first distribution of winter jackets for reservists who had been called up at the beginning of the war. I'll never forget that day. I could go on for an hour telling you how remarkable that story was. But yeah, we've actually been very blessed to have raised a lot of money and done projects, including this week, including as late as Sunday night, the last night of Hanukkah. We sponsored a barbecue for my son's unit in Syria. So I've got great pictures from there. A video I can't show because all of the soldiers' faces are visible. But we got an earmark donation, and we've been doing amazing things. And early next year, you and I are going to have something to talk about because we're planning on launching what I'm referring to as a mega project to connect Christians with soldiers, not just from fundraising. That's, there's a limited amount of times you can go back to somebody and keep asking them for more money for the same stuff, but in a relational way to connect people with people, and and tie in our modern Israeli heroes with our biblical heroes and people like yourself.
I one thing I noticed when we were traveling around Israel was everywhere we went, there were IDF soldiers. We went to Hebron, there were IDF
Yeah.
soldiers. And by the way, we did something interesting. Donna Jolet, who was our tour organizer, she said, well, she bought coupons for free pizza and soda.
Oh, lovely.
And we passed them out to IDF soldiers all over Hebron. And that was kind of a
Great.
big hit. They really, really connected with that. But we went to the Golan. There were IDF soldiers. And some of the trips we took when I was there for the Christian Media Summit, there are IDF soldiers everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're doing, I don't know, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. It appears that they're doing like heritage tours, like they're training the IDF soldiers about the history and heritage of why they're there and what they're doing.
That's always been the case. There's a lot of education that goes on in the army, and they are taken on tours. You see soldiers specifically in or around Jerusalem because it's obviously the center of our faith and of our heritage, but not exclusively. And that does happen quite a bit. But I want to mention, you're talking about Hebron and the soldiers, and it's always been that way. The soldiers are stationed everywhere, especially since October 7th, 2 years ago. But something, I mentioned I couldn't go into Syria. I'd love to have brought the food to my son's unit and stood there at the grill and barbecued all the food that they had. But, that wasn't allowed, and it wouldn't have been smart. However, I do something really remarkable that one day when you're here, either in the summer or in the winter, which is like now, I have Christian friends who bought me a huge soup pot. And some days I just wake up in the winter when it's cold here, and especially here in the Judean mountains where we're higher elevation than Jerusalem, and it does get cold in the winter, and I'll decide just to make a big pot of soup of whatever's in the house. And by the end of the day, when it's dark out, I put the pot of soup on the passenger seat. Sometimes I bring along Christian friends who are here, and I do it deliberately. Sometimes it's spontaneous, and I'll drive around as far down south as Hebron from where I live in Efrat, and we'll serve 100, 150 soldiers just a really nice hot cup of fresh soup and fresh bread. And in the summers, there's a local market walking distance from my house. I'll tell them one night, can you put 100 kilos of watermelon and 100 liter and a half bottles of drinks in the cooler? I'm going to pick them up tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And I just drive around and I take a huge knife and I just start cutting off chunks of watermelon all around. And I have to, but by the way, and you know me, it's so important that when I'm doing this, whether I'm handing out winter jackets as I did all winter 2 years ago, or soup in the winter, or watermelon, or whatever it is, I'm always reminding the soldiers or whoever our beneficiaries are that most of our donors are Christians, and the money's coming from Christians who love and support us, because it's important that they hear that they know it gives such incredible encouragement.
So when I was in Jerusalem on my tour, I didn't go to Yad Vashem. I'd been there a number of times, and I had a friend I wanted to meet at Christ Church. And so we took a walk through the Jewish quarter and learned a little bit. We went to the, I want to say the Herva Synagogue. They have a video there about the 1948 war, which is incredibly moving as to what happened there. And then we walked over to where they had been buried in a mass grave, some of the victims of that war in the old city. That I think the bodies have been relocated, but there's still the memorial. Then we walked in front of I don't know what the name of the square is. It's in front of the Rothschild house, the house they built for poor people. And there's a square there. and there were kids running around playing soccer, and there were old people walking around.
Yeah.
And my friend pointed to IDF soldiers over at a plaque on the wall there. I'm sure you've seen this, but again, it was this, I see this convergence of things. And he said, look at that. And there were two Orthodox soldiers in the group, the IDF group, and because they had kippas on.
Yeah.
And they were literally leaning up against the wall, sobbing.
Wow.
Reading the Hebrew verse on the wall, which comes from the 8th chapter of Zechariah, which talks about, and old people will be in the streets leaning on their walking sticks, and young children will be playing in the streets.
Yes.
And it was such it's hard to convey how emotionally powerful that was for me, but you could see it in the soldiers that were there. I mean, it was incredible.
So I raised, when you're a parent, you get very caught up in parenting, and sometimes you need to zoom out. And it was only with my grandchildren, the first 2 or 3 of them, when I took them to a playground once, not more than 3, maybe 4 years ago, that I saw them playing in the playground. And I realized if this is the first time it had struck me that I'm raising my children and my grandchildren in this prophecy, and my kids who call me old anyway. So every year I'm certainly getting older. Whether I'm old or not is up for debate, but I'm part of that prophecy. And by the way, something really interesting, John? One day, and I know I wrote about it. Maybe it was a post. Maybe it was a full-blown article. During the Iran war, I happened to go into Jerusalem one day, and I was stuck in traffic, and I was watching old people crossing the streets and kids playing in the streets. And I thought, yeah, thank you, God. That's the prophecy. That's the encouragement that I needed. But how amazing that we're doing this in the time that at any moment there could be an air raid siren, and these children and these old people are going to have to run to take cover somewhere.
Yeah, that's very interesting. By the way, tell us a little bit about the other thing that struck me on the trip. I came in from the airport, so I took the train and then the light rail.
Yeah,
it was 95 degrees, and and it was packed with people. It was a work day, and I had to stand up the whole. Well, I barely got a seat on the train, let alone I didn't get one on the light rail. But as we're going down Jaffa Street on the light rail, it's like every single space is a giant construction project.
Yes, and
I'm thinking, like, what is the traffic going to be like because I've looked between the barriers, and you look down 9 stories to the bottom that they're digging these foundations for these. Yeah. So these are not 2-story buildings they're building there. They're high rises.
No. Big buildings.
Yeah.
They're big buildings. They're huge buildings, and they have multi-stories of underground parking, and who knows what goes down. And they're going up 20 and 30 stories above ground in many of these new buildings. But it's fascinating, and you're right. You see construction cranes all over the skyline of Jerusalem. You could come out to not right now because it's dark out, but you could come out to my balcony tomorrow morning, and you'll see it from my balcony 15 kilometers away. You can see the construction cranes all over. But I'll tell you a funny story. And I always have to remind myself, because part of it, I'm just Jonathan Feldstein, the average Israeli who, has to get along. And so when I go into Jerusalem, as I did last night for this ridiculously wonderful conference with my friend Kelly Wright from CBN, I got stuck in traffic everywhere. And there's been so much traffic in Jerusalem that I had this thought, stop going. You're just sitting in traffic. It takes forever. Part of that is because it's been a holiday and people have been off, but part of it is also construction, not the high-rise buildings, but the continuation of the light rail, the one line that exists that you've ridden on many times. Now, in the next few years, we're going to see lines opening north, south, east, west, looping all over Jerusalem. But right now it's creating tremendous havoc. When I'm in the right state of mind, I also remind myself, I say, thank you, God. I'll sit in the traffic in Jerusalem because that's also prophecy. You've restored us. And this is just a consequence of that.
Yeah, and also when we were in Efrat, I think it was, we came down on Shabbat to Efrat, and we met with the mayor, and Ohad Paul, and they spent like 2 or 3 hours with us. And there was also, I don't know who, I think he was a developer. They took us up to the hilltop where they're building like 7,000 homes in Efrat.
Okay. I know where that
near
is.
you. I mean, so
it's in my
your community is going to explode.
Yes.
In size. I mean, I think it's probably going to double the size of Efrat.
That's correct.
So let's go back to immediate threats, and we'll try to keep this to this could go on very long. By the way, when I was in Israel, I did a program for Genesis 1-2-3. It's up on the channel. I'll put a description in the show notes, or I'll put a link in the show notes to that. It was with Marzi from Iran. How do you say her last name?
Amirizadeh.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
It took me a while to say it.
I just say I'll call her Marzi, and I intend to interview her soon. She's getting some interviews with people that were at the media summit, and I did spend a lot of time with her, talking to her, because she's a fascinating person. And we had done that program when I was in Israel a couple of weeks before with Marzi, myself, Trish.
Yeah, right. The day the hostages were released.
Yes. I was up in Tiberias in a hotel,
right?
Trying to make sure I had an internet connection and enough light and everything. But it was a fascinating discussion. So I intend to interview all those people that were involved in that, because it was a fantastic discussion. So you're the first one of that. But so talk a little bit about Syria. You mentioned you had a son up there. And what's the view on the situation in Syria?
Syria is very tenuous. There were just three Americans who were killed in Syria by jihadi troops. And the conventional wisdom and understanding is that those jihadis are affiliated with the new president, who a year ago, maybe not literally, but 53 weeks ago, had a $10 million bounty on his head because he's a jihadi. And so it's a little funny that he's been pasteurized by the White House. I'm a little concerned about that, because he certainly has not proven himself as a competent, capable leader, or, for that matter, certainly not anything form of a Democrat, capital or lowercase d. And you see minorities in Syria who are still being persecuted, the Druze specifically, Christians, Alawites, and others. And what's clear in Syria is that Turkey is trying to get its teeth in deeper and have a closer front. You mentioned what would that be? Our ninth front. Eighth front is the public relations war. Ninth front is Turkey. Turkey's trying to get its claws and roots entrenched inside Syria. And all of that's very troubling. And I don't know the rules. Just speaking about Turkey, you can't speak about Syria today without speaking about Turkey. And you can't speak about Turkey without recognizing the fact that Turkey, for some ridiculous reason, was made a member of NATO. And therefore, if Turkey comes into direct conflict with Israel, ostensibly that puts Israel in direct conflict with all of NATO. All very troubling. And rumors of the United States selling F-35s to Turkey. There are a lot of troubling signs, and they're all kind of interwoven.
I'm going to play a video clip. I hope this works.
Okay.
And this is from I-24 News about, so we're recording this on the 23rd. So this is 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
On Middle East Now on I-24 News. And this is a clip of, I think she's with, and I don't know how to say it correctly, but I'll say the Mizgov Institute, Ruth Wasserman Land,
Oh yeah,
former
she's great.
member of Knesset. And I want to play this because I think this, I've been watching Turkey for years, and I think this is one of the most astute minute or two clips that I've seen. So let's try this. Let's see.
How now must Israel work to keep the Turks from the door?
So one issue that I'd like to comment on, I completely respect and agree with every word you said, but I would even go further and say that it's not that Israel is afraid that Turkey will take over or use Syria as a stepping stone towards Israel. I think that there is no longer a Syria. I think that it's a facade. I think that it's Turkey that we are facing. It's interesting that Asharia keeps saying that Israel is, in fact, in the southern part of Syrian soil, but it says no word about Turkey being in the northern part of Syrian soil, and not for a short while, but rather for a very long while. And this is something that is a huge issue. One, Turkey is a huge country, very geostrategically placed in terms of its geographic placing. Secondly, it's a NATO member. In terms of military might, it's very capable. And obviously supporting the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, having grown up on the, let's say, ideology of the founders of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Erdogan is carrying out the absolute first stepping stones and the foundation of a future Ottoman Empire. He says it in his speeches. He speaks it in his actions. He is placing himself in Libya, in Sudan, in many places in Africa. He is the next Iran. And when Iran and the Shiite axis lowers or weakens, always the Sunni axis strengthens and vice versa. And this is something that it will eat from within the West if it doesn't wake up soon enough.
I'm watching Erdogan. I get Turkish propaganda and videos about their military capabilities in my X feed all the time. I don't know if somebody's trying to educate me or inform me or persuade me that, you know, Turkey's bigger problem than it is, but I think it is a very big problem.
It is a big problem.
You know, Turkey has sort of invaded northern Syria. And now with Iran being on sort of a downswing,
correct,
there's even concerns about Turkey exerting influence in Lebanon.
And potentially having troops or representatives in Gaza. And Turkey, we have to remember, is an outpost of the Muslim Brotherhood, about which President Trump issued an executive order to make illegal. The problem is he seems to be leaving out Turkey and Qatar, who are probably the two biggest state representatives of the Muslim Brotherhood, and from which the ideology is most promulgated.
Yeah, sort of like I would view them maybe as the financial arm of the Muslim Brotherhood and the giant military arm of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah.
I mean, Turkey's it's the largest military in NATO outside of the United States.
Is it?
Yeah. And so my concern too is when you have this Article 5 situation with regard to the NATO agreement. So under Article 5, if someone attacks directly a NATO country, then the other members of NATO are obligated, if requested, to come to the aid of the country that's been attacked. And my concern, and then they had put in this Article 5 type provision in an agreement with Qatar, or however you say it, the United States did. And now they want Turkey and Qatar to bring people into Gaza. And what happens if they get attacked because they're not doing their job?
Right.
What implications does that have on? It seems to be a very big can of worms.
Right. It's one thing that Erdogan has been very aggressive in Turkey and threatening of Israel, and there could be at some point, and has closed Turkish airspace to certain Israeli aircraft. It could be that there is a direct conflict. That certainly triggers the whole notion of Article 5. I don't know if that is the same as Turkey sending its own representatives into Gaza, or Turkish troops controlling parts of Syria, or sending another Turkish flotilla to try and break the siege, the blockade of Gaza. If there were to be those direct confrontations outside of the borders of Turkey, I don't know what happens, but I know it's not good. And I know Erdogan, also with the emasculation of Iran, is looking to restore the caliphate, the Ottoman Empire, on his terms, and nothing good is going to come of that. He's a very bad, dangerous actor.
Yeah, I don't know if. Let's see if I can pull this up here. I have an image because there's another rally. There's another rally coming up.
Okay.
Erdogan's son led one last year after the Syrian revolution. And let's see if I can get the file open here. Okay. There we go. So this was the poster for the rally. And it was kind of interesting. I've used this in many, many talks, and I'm going to do a talk on Turkey's involvement in some of these end-time prophecies that I talk about on Sunday at church. I did want to talk on it in Texas a couple months ago. But the imagery of this is very different. It's called A Sun is Rising. It was led by Erdogan's son. It was rising. But you see the sort of the double entendre then. And by the way, he plans another pro-Palestinian march on the same bridge on January 1st. I just got the poster for that this morning. And if you look at the poster, it has several things at the top. It has three images. One is Hagia Sophia, which was the largest church ever built in Christendom.
Correct.
It has a tower, which I believe is from the Umayyad
mosque. Which is now a mosque, which they've taken
5
over.
Years ago, Erdogan turned that into a mosque.
Yeah.
And that was significant. It was the largest church ever built in Christianity, ever.
Yeah.
And it's now been turned into a mosque. And so Erdogan says at the top, it says, yesterday, Hagia Sophia. In other words, we got the Christians.
Wow.
And then today, in the middle, it says, today, Umayyad, which means Damascus.
Wow.
Because Damascus had just fallen to the Turkish-led revolution.
Wow.
And tomorrow, it says Al-Aqsa. So my point is, this is not a poster about a rally. This is a battle plan.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
In the context of what's happened, so I had a friend who told me many, many years ago, watch Turkey. And it was not too long after he told me that they had, remember the thing with the ship that they were sending to Gaza to break the
Mavi
Gaza
Marmara. Yeah, that came.
Yes,
that
happened. I remember writing an article about it at the time. I can't find my
2009.
Was it that long? Okay. So yeah, it was about 2008 or 2009. My friend said, pay attention to Turkey. It's going to be very significant. And Erdogan's been very clever, but now my feed is full of videos and images of his son talking about the great father of Turkey, his father. So I don't know. Maybe I'm making too much of it, but it seems to be.
Well, you've burst my bubble, because without being inappropriate, I've been praying for Erdogan to leave the scene, so to speak. But if he's setting up his son without any pretense of any democracy in Turkey, that's terribly concerning.
Yeah, and then you see the foreign minister everywhere you look. Hadan, I think his name is Hadan.
Okay.
And he actually, this is very interesting. It's just in the news this morning. He received like a Hebrew's welcome in Syria the other day. And the Syrian press was going, or the pro-Turkish people were saying, this is incredibly significant. So I'll let you comment on that. And then I know we're kind of running a little bit long here, but so how big a threat is Turkey viewed right now in Israel?
Big. Whether as a direct confrontation or indirect, both physically in the areas in which they can have some sort of territorial control, but also in terms of being the home base for protected Hamas leaders and also financing. Iran is still pushing money through Turkey, I believe, and no, Turkey's a very big concern, and I'm also concerned with President Trump's apparent enamoration of Erdogan, and even the concept that anyone would sell them F-35s is ridiculous on so many levels.
Yeah, it's well, I know there are elections coming up in Turkey. I don't know if they're this year or next year, in 26 or 27. But if there are elections, I have in my preparation for my talk on Turkey, I found an editorial cartoon of Erdogan, and there were two ballot boxes. One said Prime Minister, the next one said, and they were like in stair steps, and Erdogan was walking up them. So it was Prime Minister, then President. Remember, he changed the Constitution,
yes.
And then there was a Sultan throne.
Oh,
So that it sort of captured the essence of what I think is going on there. So I want to shift gears here because I know the relationship between Christians and Jews are important to you, and you've written some good articles. I think you wrote a great article. I think you've done a series of them about maybe just summarize for them what the solution for peace in Gaza is. What?
Yeah, the solution for peace in Gaza. Matter of fact, the idea was triggered exactly 2 years ago. It was published the first time on Christmas Day of 2023, where I published an article entitled "The Solution for Peace in Gaza is Jesus," which is a radical title coming from an Orthodox Israeli Jew. But I did so 2 years ago simply to undermine the notion that there could ever be a two-state solution. And I thought, that would be funny, Jonathan. Write something equally as ridiculous about Gaza, because a two-state solution surely is ridiculous. But that got some traction, as you might imagine, among Christians. I was asked to rewrite it in February, I believe, of 24, while at the NRB convention. It was published in the Washington Times, in which I made a amateur's mistake of calling for open evangelism inside Gaza, and the notion of sending 100,000 or 200,000 Christians into Gaza, not to evangelize, but to be responsible for the rebuilding and building something there that they can have aspirations over, and because 2 million Gazans are not just suddenly going to leave. That second article got a great deal of traction. A lot of Christians got very excited about it, as you would imagine, and we now have a program that we are promoting somewhat, although very candidly I've been promoting it less since I was threatened this year, seriously threatened over the concept. Solutionforpeaceingaza.com. We're not calling for open evangelism, but I will say this. On the page, it just happened to pop up on my computer today. The page was open and it popped up. There's a page on solutionforpeaceingaza.com that I think has the title, "What World Leaders Are Saying." And we have several people from around the world, mostly American Biden administration representatives and Israelis, essentially saying you can defeat Hamas militarily, but you can't defeat their ideology unless you replace it with a better ideology. So my hope, 50 miles outside my window, I can drive to Gaza, go to the beach, I have aspirations one day that I'll be able to go to the beach and get a kosher hamburger in Gaza. I have aspirations that my grandsons will not grow up fighting jihadi terrorists who are their peers 50 miles away from where we live. And I believe that that can only happen through a change of hearts. And that has to be through Christianity. They won't accept Judaism. I don't believe it's our mission. We were not told to go and make disciples. We can be the light unto the nations, and Gazans, I pray, will have a relationship with the God of Israel and will understand that there are many, many biblical examples of living in peace and prosperity with Israel and the Jewish people as Gentiles. And I think, having now, during the war, flown through Dubai a couple of times and seeing what they've built, I think minus the oil, the Gazans have an even greater treasure that they're living next to, living on top of, which is us, the Israeli people, the Jewish state. And if they would only embrace us as peaceful Muslims or as Christians, which I would celebrate, I think that's the only solution for peace in Gaza. It's not diplomatic, it's not political, it's surely not setting up a Palestinian state. And whether it's Turkey, Qatar, Indonesia, Pakistan, Ireland and Iceland and Spain, the countries, some of the countries that hate us the most, going in with, they're not called peacekeeping forces. I forget what the Trumpian term is.
International Stabilization Force.
Stabilization Force, none of whom will disarm Gaza or make Gazans safe and peaceful from themselves.
So I don't know if, well, I'll share it because I don't want to take up all the time. When I was at Near Oz with the Christian Media Summit, we were there and we had the head of security on October 7th taking us around the kibbutz. That's where the Bibas family had been taken captive, and the mother and two children were killed later. But I noticed something interesting as we were out on the fence facing Gaza. So the Gaza border fence is roughly a kilometer away.
Yeah.
And you could hear explosions. You could see buildings still standing in Gaza from where we were. But on top of one of the buildings there was a sign. And it said Gush Katif. It was a road sign. It was like somebody had taken a road sign about how to get to Gush Katif, and they put it on top of the building there, pointing towards Gush Katif in Gaza.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to a first responder at the Nova Festival, and I said, well, maybe if Gush Katif was still there, October 7th wouldn't happen. And he said, no, you're wrong. It's not maybe it wouldn't have happened. It would not have happened. Because it was a destruction of a Jewish community back in 2005, which nobody in the world ever protested. You know,
correct.
We made them evacuate, and then they went
in Israel, and it was naive to think that we could evacuate Gaza and have peace. And for good or for bad, Ariel Sharon, who threatened that as soon as they started getting violent, there would be, I don't know if it was his term, but it's a term Trump has used a lot in the last year, hell to pay. But he ended up in a coma, and there was never hell to pay. And we've been on the ropes with Gaza ever since, and that can't ever happen again.
Yeah. So any final thoughts? I want to ask you about a person we affectionately know here in America now is Tucker Carlson. But we'll talk about that another time, just because it's been heavy enough, and that's it's a very problematic geopolitical situation on the right wing in America right now. I don't know how to say it. There's rise. I don't like the term anti-Semitism. I prefer the term outright Jew hatred, and it's growing in the American right, and it's very troubling. So we'll talk about that another time. But any final thoughts that you might have, you want to share with us today, and where people can get a hold of you or follow you at?
Right. So first, anyone can be in touch at genesis123.co or on all of the social media. Genesis 123 Foundation, with pleasure. And last thoughts, we're 2 days after the conclusion of Hanukkah, which is, I always remind Christians, is the Jewish holiday that Christians are connected to the least, but it's the Jewish holiday which is only referenced in the book of John, where Jesus comes to Jerusalem in the winter to celebrate the Feast of the Dedication. So if Jesus celebrated Hanukkah, I think that Christians should have a deep look into the significance historically, not to co-opt what Hanukkah is in fact about. It was a military victory where we, the Jewish people, shook off foreign invaders because we were and remain the indigenous people who were invaded at that time. So people should connect with Hanukkah. And I would also say, for those who are celebrating Christmas this week, I wish you a Merry Christmas, and for the new year, that we should, as Jews and as Christians, whether it's the same side of the coin or opposite sides of the same coin, I don't care. I'm not so worried about nuance, but I think what the last 2 years has shown is that we are both in the crosshairs, Jews and Christians. We're on the same side. We must be on the same side, and we must be united and only stronger together. So I want to thank you, John, for everything you're doing in your ministry and giving me this opportunity always, and everyone who follows you, who cares about the truth. Your foot soldiers in the war against truth.
Well, thank you very much. We'll look forward to doing this in the future. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
God bless you.